Do something for me. Think about the last time you climbed a flight of stairs. Did it feel harder than it used to? What about getting out of a chair? Do you sometimes push off the armrests to stand up? Do your legs feel weaker than they did a few years ago, even though you're still walking regularly? If so, you're not alone. And here's the surprising part. Walking may not be the reason you're staying independent. In fact, many adults over 60 assume that if they're walking every day, they're doing everything they need to stay strong. But what if that's not the whole story? What if one of the biggest mistakes people make is confusing movement with strength? Because the ability that often determines whether someone remains independent in their 70s, 80s, and beyond isn't how far they can walk. It's whether they can still stand up powerfully, react quickly, and support their own body weight when it matters most. That's why some people walk every day and still struggle to climb stairs, stand up easily, or recover their balance, while others remain capable, confident, and independent well into later life. Today, you'll discover why that happens, what changes inside the body after 60, and the simple movement many experts consider more important than walking alone when it comes to protecting strength, balance, and independence. Because the problem may not be your age. The problem may be that nobody ever taught you the difference between movement and strength. So if walking isn't the ability that best predicts independence, what is? The answer surprises a lot of people. Because when researchers study adults in their 70s, 80s, and beyond, they don't just look at how far someone can walk. They look at something much simpler. Can they stand up from a chair without using their hands? Can they climb a flight of stairs without stopping halfway? Can they recover their balance when they trip or lose their footing? These small, everyday abilities often reveal far more about long-term independence than most people realize. And here's something many people never hear. The loss of independence rarely happens all at once. It usually begins with small changes that seem easy to dismiss. A little more effort to stand up, a little less confidence on stairs, a little more hesitation when moving quickly. At first, they seem like normal signs of aging. But what if they're actually signs that something important inside the body has already started to change? Think about it. Almost every important activity in daily life depends on these abilities. Getting out of bed, getting off the toilet, carrying groceries, walking upstairs, getting in and out of a car, even catching yourself before a fall. Because while many people blame age itself, age is often only part of the story. And what happens next may explain why some adults remain strong, capable, and independent for decades, while others slowly begin to struggle with activities they once performed without thinking. So, what exactly changes inside the body after 60? And why can walking every day still leave many people feeling weaker over time? So, what exactly changes inside the body after 60? The answer begins with something called sarcopenia. Now, don't let the name intimidate you. Sarcopenia is simply the gradual loss of muscle that tends to happen as we age. But here's what most people never hear. The problem isn't just that muscles become smaller. The problem is that some of the most important muscle fibers begin to disappear first. These are known as fast-twitch muscle fibers. They're the fibers responsible for power, for reacting quickly, for catching yourself when you trip, for climbing stairs, for standing up from a chair, and for producing the kind of strength that helps keep you independent. Think of it this way. If slow-twitch fibers help you keep moving, fast-twitch fibers help you keep functioning. They are the difference between walking across a parking lot and quickly stepping up onto a curb, the difference between getting out of a chair easily and needing to push off with your hands, the difference between recovering your balance and ending up on the ground. And here's where things become interesting. Many people believe that if they're walking every day, they're protecting all of these abilities. But walking primarily challenges the slow twitch fibers that help you sustain movement over longer periods. The very fibers most closely linked to strength, power, balance, and independence often receive far less challenge. Over time, the body begins to adapt, and the message it receives is simple. We need movement, but not necessarily. We need strength, and the body responds accordingly. That's why someone can walk every day and still find themselves struggling to stand up, climb stairs, or recover their balance a few years later. Not because they're lazy, not because they're doing something wrong, but because the body responds specifically to the demands placed upon it. And after 60, that distinction becomes more important than ever. So if walking alone isn't sending the signal your body needs to maintain strength, what does? So what's the mistake most people make? They assume that if they're walking every day, they're doing everything their muscles need. And to be clear, walking is one of the best habits you can have after 60. It supports cardiovascular health. It helps you stay active. It can improve mood. And it's associated with a wide range of health benefits. The problem isn't that walking is bad. The problem is believing that walking alone is enough. Because movement and strength are not the same thing. Think about someone who carries a light grocery bag every day. They're moving, they're active, they're using their muscles. But if they never lift anything heavier, never stand up quickly, and never challenge their muscles to produce more force, those abilities gradually begin to weaken. The human body works in a surprisingly similar way. It adapts to whatever demands are placed upon it. And if those demands rarely require power, the body gradually stops prioritizing power. If those demands rarely require strength, the body gradually stops prioritizing strength. That's why many adults continue walking faithfully every day, yet still find themselves struggling with the very abilities that matter most. Standing up easily, climbing stairs confidently, recovering balance quickly, carrying groceries without effort. The goal isn't to stop walking. The goal is to understand what walking does and what it doesn't do. Because once you understand that difference, everything begins to make more sense. And it raises an important question. If walking is excellent for movement, what kind of movement helps maintain strength? So what kind of movement helps maintain strength after 60? The answer may be much simpler than most people expect. In fact, it doesn't require a gym membership, it doesn't require expensive equipment, and it doesn't require hours of exercise. It starts with a movement almost everyone performs every single day, standing up from a chair and sitting back down again. At first, that may sound almost too simple. How could something so ordinary make a meaningful difference? The answer goes back to everything we've discussed so far. Remember those fast-twitch muscle fibers? The fibers responsible for power, balance, reaction, and independence. Unlike walking, standing up from a chair requires your body to generate force against resistance. You have to lift your own body weight, which is exactly the kind of strength many daily activities depend on. You have to coordinate multiple muscle groups at the same time, and you have to produce the kind of force that helps you stand, climb, react, and remain independent. Researchers and physical therapists have paid close attention to this movement for years. Not because it's flashy, not because it's complicated, but because it closely reflects one of the most important abilities people need to maintain as they age. The ability to rise from a seated position confidently and independently. Because walking helps you keep moving, but strength helps you stay independent. Think about how often this happens throughout a normal day. Getting out of bed, standing up from the dinner table, leaving the sofa, getting up from the toilet. Each of these moments requires strength, and each of them becomes more difficult when strength begins to decline. That's why many experts consider the simple sit-to-stand movement one of the most practical ways to challenge the muscles that walking often leaves undertrained. Not because it's the only exercise worth doing, but because it directly trains a skill that helps support everyday independence. And there's another reason this movement is so powerful. It can be adapted to almost any fitness level, which means nearly everyone can start somewhere. So how do you actually use this movement to build strength safely and effectively? The good news is that you don't need to start with dozens of repetitions, and you certainly don't need to push yourself to exhaustion. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to do too much too soon. Strength is built gradually, and consistency almost always matters more than intensity. Imagine someone named Robert. He's 78 years old. He walks every day. He stays active. But over the past few years, he noticed something changing. Getting out of low chairs felt harder. Stairs required more effort, and he found himself using his hands more often when standing up. Like many people, he assumed it was simply part of getting older. But the real issue wasn't that he stopped moving. The issue was that he stopped challenging the muscles responsible for standing, climbing, and producing force. So he began practicing a simple sit-to-stand movement. Nothing extreme. Just standing up from a chair and sitting back down again in a controlled way. At first, even 5 repetitions felt challenging, but over time, something started to change. Standing became easier, stairs felt less intimidating, and everyday movements required less effort. Not because he became an athlete, but because he began training the exact ability he was starting to lose. And that's the key. You don't have to train like a bodybuilder. You simply have to give your muscles a reason to stay strong. For many people, that might mean starting with 5 to 10 controlled sit-to-stand repetitions, using a sturdy chair, moving slowly, and focusing on good control rather than speed. As strength improves, the movement can be made more challenging. But the goal isn't perfection. The goal is to consistently send the signal your muscles have been missing. The signal that says, we still need strength. We still need power. And when the body receives that signal often enough, it begins adapting accordingly. So beyond stronger legs and easier stairs, what else can this kind of strength help protect? What else can this kind of strength help protect? The answer goes far beyond muscles. Because for many adults, the real fear isn't having weaker legs. The real fear is watching life become smaller. Little by little, without even realizing it. Losing confidence, losing freedom, needing help with things that once felt effortless. It rarely happens overnight. Most of the time, it begins with small adjustments, taking the elevator instead of the stairs, avoiding longer walks, choosing not to go out as often, thinking twice before carrying something heavy. At first, these changes seem insignificant, but over time, they can quietly reshape daily life. That's why strength matters so much after 60. Not because stronger muscles are impressive, but because strength helps support independence. It helps support confidence, and it helps support the ability to continue doing the things that make life enjoyable. Visiting family, traveling, playing with grandchildren, running errands without assistance, living life on your own terms. And here's something worth remembering. Many people assume this gradual decline is simply the price of getting older. But that's not always true, because the problem isn't necessarily age itself. The problem is often that the body stops receiving the signals it needs to maintain the abilities that matter most. That's why walking helps you keep moving. But strength helps you stay independent. And once you understand that difference, the next step becomes much easier. So if you wanted to start protecting that independence today, where would you begin? Where should you begin? The good news is that protecting strength doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't require turning your life upside down. For most people, the first step is surprisingly simple. Choose a sturdy chair. Sit down, stand up, and sit back down again. Start with a number that feels manageable. For some people, that might be 5 repetitions. For others, it might be 10. The exact number matters far less than consistency. Because strength isn't built in a single day. It's built through small signals repeated over time. Remember what we discussed earlier. The body adapts to the demands placed upon it. When you repeatedly ask your muscles to produce force, the body receives a message. We still need this ability. And that's exactly the message many people stop sending as they get older. If the movement feels easy, that's okay. If it feels challenging, that's okay too. The goal isn't to compare yourself to anyone else. The goal is simply to begin. And as confidence improves, there are many ways to make the movement more challenging. You can slow down the lowering phase, pause briefly before standing, or increase the number of repetitions gradually over time. But don't focus on perfection. Focus on consistency, because the habits that protect strength are often the same habits that help protect independence. And perhaps that's the most encouraging part. You don't have to become stronger than you were at 30. You don't have to train like an athlete. You simply have to continue giving your body a reason to maintain the abilities that matter most. The ability to stand, to climb, to react, to move confidently, and to remain independent for as long as possible. And that brings us to one final thought about strength, independence, and what many people get wrong about aging itself. As we've seen today, walking is one of the best habits you can have after 60. But walking and strength are not the same thing. And understanding that difference may change the way you think about aging. Because the ability to remain independent isn't determined by a single body part. It's influenced by your muscles, your balance, your reaction time, and your body's ability to continue doing the things everyday life demands. The good news is that many of these abilities can still be challenged, they can still be trained, and they can still be supported. Not through complicated routines, not through extreme workouts, but through simple signals repeated consistently over time. Signals that tell the body, we still need this. We still need strength. We still need power. And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all. Many people assume that weakness is simply the price of getting older, that losing strength is inevitable, that needing more help every year is just, part of life. But that's not always true, because the problem isn't necessarily age itself. The problem is often that the body stops receiving the signals it needs to maintain the abilities that matter most. That's why walking helps you keep moving. But strength helps you stay independent. And independence is what allows you to keep doing the things that make life meaningful. On your own terms, visiting family, traveling, playing with grandchildren. Living life on your own terms. And now I'm curious. How many sit-to-stand repetitions can you do comfortably today? Let us know in the comments below. And if you'd like more evidence-based insights to help you stay strong, capable, and independent after 60, be sure to subscribe and join us for future videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.